Welcome to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ, your go-to podcast for the latest developments in law, technology, and everything in between. I trust that 2026 is shaping up to be a year of extraordinary AI developments where the boundaries of what is possible and sometimes what is tolerable are being tested daily. At the start of the year, we saw disturbing trends where AI tools like Grok on X, formerly Twitter, allowed users to digitally undress individuals using just publicly available photos. Now, as we record these episodes, AI agents like Notebook are interacting with each other, and the digital landscape is evolving on a daily or even hourly basis. Now, before Malaysia even has its own AI specific legislation, a pressing concern has emerged regulating harmful content online, whether created by AI or humans. And so it couldn't be more timely for us to discuss one of the most important legal developments this year, or at the start of this year so far, the Online Safety Act 2025, which came into force on the 1st of January 2026. Now, today we have Ong Johnson, the head of Technology Practice Group, and Khai, the co-head of our Technology Practice Group, joining us to break down this landmark law. We'll explore what the law is, who it applies to, and its extraterritorial reach, the definition of harmful content, and more. Given its complexity, we'll split this discussion as usual to 2 episodes, so please catch episode 33 in the next one. So Johnson and Khai, thank you for joining us once again on the
Always
show.
good to see you, Zach. Thanks for having us.
Now, to Johnson, the Online Safety Act is a very, very new law. And in the last few years, we've seen the Cybersecurity Act 2024, which we've spoken extensively about, and the PDPA Amendment Act 2025, which you've written a book about. And now, the Online Safety Act 2025. All these laws seems to relate to one thing in common, which is online safety, internet governance, and personal data protection. Now, for those who may not be familiar with tech law, can you help us to understand what the Online Safety Act is all about?
Yeah, Zach, always happy to see you. Yes, I think new year, new me. So new year, new law as well. Every year, I think that right now Malaysia, we are trying to launch a new law. I don't think it's intended, but also because of the evolution of internet and also the digital space, there is a crying need for our government to actually launch, also actually establish new law to safeguard the digital environment. So to be honest, Online Safety Act 2025, the name itself is quite self-explanatory, is to ensure online safety. I would say that if I'm able to analyze it using a very layman perspective, the Online Safety Act is really there to govern, I would call it maybe the 3 perspectives. Number 1, they are there to regulate, to mitigate, and most importantly, is actually reduce harmful contents that is available online or digital space. For the longest time, I think that we have been on the internet for long enough. There must be a point of time where it comes to our concerns thinking that why is our government not doing anything? Why are we seeing that many harmful content online? So this is the exact intention of the Online Safety Act, which is to regulate, mitigate, and to reduce harmful content that is available online.
Right. The question is like, why now? Because harmful online content is not new.
Yeah.
It's been there since the start of the internet. But why now? Why?
Yeah, I think the reason is because technology law is always developing. So in the market, there's always a saying that our lawmaker is always playing catching up. If I'm able to actually maybe draw an analogy, for example, like IP law. IP law is actually very much matured in the market. We have trademark, we have copyright, we have patent, industrial design. But looking at all this law, it takes them many, many years for them to develop and to expand this kind of law to protect intellectual property. Similarly, when we are talking about technology law, it takes time for us to properly legislate, properly table the particular bill in the parliament, and for the law to be eventually passed.
Yeah, and I will also add on to that, right? Why now? I suppose it is not just now then only Malaysia are looking into it. In fact, online safety has been something that our lawmakers and our ministers have been talking about for quite a few years. But things became more urgent, I would say, since AI became more commonplace. Because of AI and with the current AI technology that are available out there, it makes it so much easier for people to create content, whether fake or not, right? And a lot of all this created content fall within the categories of harmful content online, and hence why the urgency is a lot more now.
Yeah, thanks guys. That's very insightful. But how does it interact or compare with the PDP Act and the Cybersecurity Act that we already have in place. Now, tech law seems to be getting more and more complicated.
Yeah.
There's multi-facets to it and more fascinating. So could you help our listeners explain or understand how the Online Safety Act fits into this big ecosystem?
I think it's actually very true. I mean, just like I did mention about IP law. For example, IP law, they are model law. For example, trademark, patents, industrial design, all these things, every single model law, they actually play a bigger role in the entire ecosystem. Similarly, when we're talking about technology law, which is we call it the new thing, you have already pointed out, in Malaysia, we have PDPA, and then just not long ago, we have Cybersecurity Act. And then right now, we have Online Safety Act 2025, which just came into force early this year, 1st Jan. When it comes to PDPA, the whole subject matter is to really protect your personal data, which includes information about data subjects, about how are they supposed to transfer personal data, access of personal data, how they're supposed to store, how they're supposed to process of personal data. Everything in relation to PDPA is about personal data of an individual. It's only particular to the segment. Whereas when it comes to Cybersecurity Act 2024, so the law itself is only concerns cybersecurity in relation to NCAI. So when we're talking about NCAI, I mean, do visit our previous episodes. It's really concerning the 11 NCAI sectors and also those companies they are lucky enough to be designated as NCAI entities. When we are talking about NCAI, it's not about every cybersecurity. It's really talking about national critical information infrastructure, things that will really break Malaysia if things go wrong. For example, the highway or even electricity and whatnot. When we are looking at Online Safety Act, it's also looking at another segment. As mentioned by Khai earlier, this particular Online Safety Act, the whole intention is to really regulate and to govern the harmful content that is made available online. So I would say that every law, we call it tech law, they all are playing different role, not to compete, but to actually to complement the bigger ecosystem.
Thanks, Johnson. Now, Khai, now we have the sense or a sense of the law's role in the broader tech ecosystem, like what Johnson has just explained. Can you explain to us, who the Online Safety Act actually applies to? Is it all companies or more specific entities, like how what Johnson mentioned, the CSA applies to only NCII entities?
Yeah. In this case, unlike Personal Data Protection Act, it applies to anybody at all that processes personal data. Right? In this case, the target regulatees are very, very niche. We are only looking at 3 main groups of people, and all these people, they are all licensees under the Communications and Multimedia Act. First of all, we are looking at applications service provider. I'm going to be reading a bunch of jargons in a bit. Telecommunications jargon, applications service provider, those who provide services through network, right? Next would be content applications service provider, essentially those who provide application service which provide content. The last group of people would be the network service providers. I think the name is a lot more familiar than the first two. Those that operates a network service, right? So essentially, the Act is only looking at these 3 groups of people, with the first 2 being the major target regulators under the Act, and the later bearing only a small part of regulation, a small part of obligations under the Online Safety Act.
That's helpful. But sometimes the terminologies, like you mentioned, can be abstract. Can you break it down with maybe some real life examples so our listeners can relate to these?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the first one, applications service provider. As its name suggests, right, these people, they are providing services through network service. Think the likes of social media services. So, okay, maybe let me backtrack a little bit. Perhaps let me give a brief context. Let's start with applications service provider first. So if you look through the communications and multimedia, all the legislations, right, there is actually a particular document that sets out the types of services regulated under each of these categories. Application service provider, one of the category would be internet messaging services and also social media services. So essentially, we are looking at the likes of WhatsApp, Telegram, Instagram, Facebook, the typical social media platforms. So these people, they would be regulated under applications service provider. And the next group of people are the content applications service provider. If I can put it in layman terms, essentially, content applications service provider, they are the ones that making sure that content are being delivered to the audience. So think of your infotainment system, your in-flight infotainment system. Let's say if you take Singapore Airlines or you take Emirates, Etihad, you can watch show in flight, right? So those people, they are the ones that are responsible for bringing the content to you. So these group of people, they will be regulated under the content applications service provider category, and Astro and Unified TV as well, because they bring content to you through terrestrial network, through you know it. Network service providers essentially are our telcos and our internet service providers, Maxis, CelcomDigi, and TM.
Thanks for clarifying, Khai. Now, Johnson, with that in mind, we know some of these tech giants, their services are being used in Malaysia, but perhaps they don't operate physically in Malaysia. Does the law even apply to these tech giants, or are they invincible here?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. So the thing about this Online Safety Act and what I really like and what I really love about this particular law is that within the first few pages, it makes it very clear that this particular law has extra-territorial effect. For those who may not be very familiar with the term, in very simple layman term, it means that for this Online Safety Act, even though for companies, they may not be physically operating in Malaysia, but as long as they are providing services in Malaysia, as mentioned by Khai, if they are actually operating the role either as ASP, CSP, or NSP, as long as they're operating in Malaysia, even though the HQ can be in US, can be in Singapore, or anywhere else, they will still be bound by the Online Safety Act. In other words, they would still need to comply with all the obligations stated within this law.
Yeah. And typically, it's the ASPs that would be ASPs. Just like I mentioned, one of the category would be internet messaging services and also social media services, right? Typically, it's these companies that would have headquarters in foreign countries and may not necessarily have a local presence, a local setup, a local entity here in Malaysia. But the law makes it very, very clear that when the law was amended a few years ago, adding internet messaging services and also social media services as part of the category of application service providers. So at that point in time, the law also says that if you don't have a local setup here in Malaysia, you need to appoint a local representative.
Yes.
So that's how the law play with extra-territorial application as well. By having a local representative, then the Act actually says that government can reach out to the local representatives to communicate with the service providers overseas and also actually to serve process on them as well. Should there be a need to?
That's good. That's good. Now that actually reminds me of what happened with X, formerly Twitter, when MCMC actually directed a temporary restriction on Grok's access for Malaysian users. Now, Johnson, can you shed some light on the latest development of this?
Yeah, in fact, there is a very excellent case study of actually what's happening in Malaysia concerning Online Safety Act and also the topic we're talking right now, which is extra-territorial effect. So for those who may not be very familiar, it's just a very TLDR version. So what happened is Twitter, which is X, the current X, they have their own AI tool, which is Grok. Early this year, this particular AI tool, they have a very disturbing feature in which any random users can just go using this AI tool and then type a single prompt, and then they are able to generate any random photos by turning them into very compromising bikini photos. You can imagine most of the victims are definitely women and also minors. With that, what happened is a lot of people actually make a complaint to X and also to MCMC, which is the regulator. As we can understand and we all know that X, they don't really operate in Malaysia. And most importantly, the HQ is actually not in Malaysia. But as mentioned by Khai, they have a local representative. So what happened is our minister, which is Fahmi, our communication minister, reached out, and also MCMC put out a very strong statement. They make it very clear by saying that they would need X. Number one, they want them to actually stop allowing Grok to be producing, to be actually distributing harmful content. And most importantly, they actually give a very strong statement. They want X to strengthen the governance control to ensure that harmful content is not being circulated online. So much so to the point that they even issue, we call it a temporary restriction. Basically, they want to restrict users in Malaysia by having any access to Grok. With that, MCMC and also our Minister Fahmi reached out and also they set a meeting with the local representative. And then with that, things were eventually resolved. Right now, if you go on Twitter or X, and you are not able to use Grok to generate these sort of photos, these sort of images anymore. We can see, even though X being a giant, even though their HQ is not in Malaysia, but due to the extra-territorial effect of this Online Safety Act and also others law, our minister, our regulator, we are able to reach out to them, and then we are able to address the underlying concern very effectively.
Wonderful. That's great developments. Now, Khai, Johnson mentioned earlier about harmful content, but these days, morality and decency very subjective, right?
Yes.
So what exactly constitutes harmful content under the law?
Yeah. As you have rightly pointed out, morality and decency is very, very subjective, right? What may actually be offensive to me or harmful to me, what I may deem as harmful may not necessarily be the same as what you may view as harmful. But so the law actually tries to put in place a guidance, so to speak. The law actually lists out a list of content, or rather the types of content that should be considered as harmful by the platforms. The list is quite long. There are 9 of them, and I wouldn't go through it. I wouldn't name it verbatim. But if I can just summarize very, very quickly, essentially, these harmful content, so-called harmful content, are the ones that relate to, say, child sexual abuse material, CSAM, content on financial fraud, content that would cause some form of harm, right, including self-harm, and content that incites violence or public unrest, content that promotes use of drugs, or even content that is obscene or indecent, based on cultural and generally accepted behavior. So essentially, if a platform assess a particular content and thinks that it falls within any of this category, they should then flag this as harmful content already and take the necessary steps as mandated under the Online Safety Act. So essentially, platforms, they are not left to wonder and just decide based on their own internal criteria what is harmful and what is not harmful. Essentially, the Online Safety Act is trying to put in place a guardrail, if I can put it that way, to help platforms to assess objectively or subjectively what is harmful and what is not harmful.
Well, hopefully no listeners will think that whatever things I mentioned is actually arguable.
Yeah.
Certain things are more clear-cut.
Yes, correct. It should be.
Now, before we wrap up, can be Khai or Johnson, do you think the definition of harmful content at this point in time is broad enough and sufficient to achieve its purpose?
Certainly, because as I've mentioned just now, the list is rather long. And if you actually go and read the wordings of the list of harmful content, they're not drafted very prescriptively or very narrowly and restrictively. They are worded rather broadly and all-encompassing. So it allows rooms for interpretation. It allows rooms for construction, right? So I think on that basis, it's sufficient. In fact, as I mentioned just now, it even takes generally accepted behavior and culture into consideration when deciding what is obscene and what is indecent, right? So definitely, we won't be faced with a scenario where minority groups' interests are actually discriminated or overlooked when deciding what is harmful to them, and as opposed to what is harmful to the general public, right? But at the same time, of course, the list of harmful content is not something that is carved into stone. It doesn't mean that it's set as how it is right now and it will never change, because culture shifts, right? What's generally accepted behavior may not necessarily be the same 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. So the Act also empowers, or rather it makes it easy for ministers to actually amend the list. So just a bit of context. The Online Safety Act is creating a committee called the Online Safety Committee. So some of the functions of this Online Safety Committee is to research on what is harmful, what content would be considered harmful, and determine on the types of online harmful content. With the consultation with the committee, the MCMC can actually recommend to the minister to make changes to this list from time to time. And all that the minister has to do is just to pass an order, and they will be able to amend the list of harmful content already. So to some extent, yes, currently it's sufficient.
Yeah, and then to add on, of course, I think that they can be something a bit more subjective. I mean, coming from a very conservative point of view, I mean, if you ask me, I only hope that the list will only be expanded, but in no situation it will be ever be reduced.
Yep.
So, I mean, the last thing that we want to see, or what I want personally to see, is that one day they are saying that, look, child pornography, child sexual abuse material is no longer harmful content. That's not what we want to see.
Totally agreed on that. Thank you both, Johnson and Khai. That was a really productive discussion, and diving deep into the Online Safety Act 2025, we now have a pretty solid basic foundational understanding of what the law is, who it applies to, and how it intersects with other tech laws. And the definition of harmful content, that's kind of the most important part of this episode. Now, in the next episode, in episode 33, we'll go in further covering the reporting mechanisms for harmful content, how the law actually operates as a sword or a shield, and what companies should be doing to ensure compliance with the Online Safety Act 2025. Now, it's been an incredible start to our third season so far, and we've been having so much fun just exploring new laws, exploring new ways of doing the podcast together as well. So for Johnson and Khai, thank you for sharing your expertise, your insights, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in.